This is a conversation with Mario, one of my dedicated students who has been on the inspiring journey of learning Polish. But this podcast isn't just about grammar and vocab. It's a wide-ranging exploration of language, identity, cultural shock, politics, and the future of AI. Mario shares how a single emotional moment, reading his wedding vows in Polish, became a turning point that pushed him to truly learn the language. What begins as a story about phrases and pronunciation quickly expands into something much bigger, about empathy, education, and personal growth. In this episode, Mario opens up about the powerful moment that made him commit to Polish and why English just wasn't enough to express his love. Growing up in South Texas, tortillas, deer hunting, and cowboy hats included. Cultural shock in Poland, from reserved people to no small talk at the checkout. Working and education, and how becoming a language learner himself made him a more compassionate teacher. Polish versus American values, from politics and honesty to how we treat the things we own. The Elon Musk phenomenon in Texas, and what it says about innovation and identity. Why AI can help with translation, but can't replace real human conversation. His job interview at a military university in Warsaw, and the unexpected consequences of being a US citizen in today's political climate. This is one of the most personal and eye-opening podcasts I've ever done. Mario speaks with honesty, warmth, and curiosity, and reminds us why learning a language is really about learning people. My ultimate goal is to create the most engaging online Polish language course, and students like Mario continuously inspire and motivate me to make this vision a reality. But your involvement matters too. Together, let's build an extraordinary community for Polish learners worldwide. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which topics and resources would best support you in your Polish learning journey. Thank you.
Małgośka mówią mi, on nie wart jednej łzy, on nie jest wart jednej łzy. Oj, głupia! Małgośka wróżą skarb, on nie jest...
So, the first question is, why did you start learning Polish?
So I wanted to really get into Polish was when, of course, me and my wife have been together for 3 years, married for 4 years. Married for 4 months, sorry, not years, sorry, married for 4 months. And I read my vows to her in Polish and in English, but it wasn't the same to hear them in Polish as they were in my English compared to my English. And it really, really made me feel upset with myself that I had not built up a larger, well, holding of the Polish language, from living in Poland for about, 3 years, studying here, living here. I had only
Yeah,
learned what I needed, to, well, essentially get by. And we moved back to the US for a job opportunity that I had. And we liked it there for some time, but after the vows I said to her, man, it really hurt me because I really want her to hear what I have to say in her own language so she can truly understand. So yeah, that's why I really want to pick it up.
yeah,
Uh,
nice. Very nice reason, yeah.
I'd hope
And
so, but yeah.
yeah, and so how did you start learning it?
I learned from personal interaction, one-on-one interaction, either between myself and my wife, or friends of hers, or her family, university students that I went with, that I met, my classmates, and basically picking it up piece by piece, phrases that I became aware of. I didn't know how to spell or even, formulate these into sentences, but I knew these phrases and I knew what they meant. So that's essentially what I had accumulated was a lot of phrases from memorization, from what I understood. And so this is what my, well, basic Polish understanding is you know, common phrases to help me get through, understanding some colloquial context as well. But that's essentially how I've been developing my Polish skills for the most part, is truly engrossing myself around the people. And aside from that, I did begin, as I've spoken to you about, with a small Polish book, phrase book, and I found myself being, inconsistent with it, either from just sheer laziness or just, being forgetful. And so I really wanted to get a structure, get a routine going, and so that brought me to you.
Yeah. And how exactly did you find yourself in Poland? I know you told me there was like a time when you lived a little bit in Texas, a little bit in Poland. How did
So this all started when I was in university in Texas at Texas A&M International University. It's at the very bottom of South Texas, very Hispanic.
okay.
And I was there for 3 years. It was 2021. And my wife at the time, a stranger to me, uh, was in my Spanish class and didn't talk much, but I thought she was really beautiful, and so I was like, man, I really want to sit next to her. And the funny thing is that the seat next to her was already assigned to someone, but I joined the class late, and so I just stole someone's seat. And so from there, we got to know each other. And of course, she was still there in the United States, and COVID occurred. No traveling, big travel bans, flights were getting canceled left and right. And
Yeah.
so she didn't really have anywhere to go after a semester. And so she stayed there at the dormitories. But they're very expensive because again, COVID had just occurred and universities didn't know what to do. And so they were still charging people, unfortunately. And so um, I asked my family, hey, this is the situation she's in. Can she stay with us for the summer? And for some reason, I'm not sure why, but they agreed. They said yes. And my parents said, well, I would want someone to do the same thing for my children. So yes,
Yeah.
of course, she has nowhere else to go, so yes. So we got to know each other, quite well during university, and then during the summer when she was staying with my family at our house. And so we got to know each other, and then we went back to the university, of course. And at this point, she had finished her bachelor's, and I still needed another year to go. And so she applied for a scholarship for her master's. And unfortunately, she wasn't a Texas resident, so it didn't go through.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, so during the break, uh, I just decided, you know what, like I have to see you. I want to visit you. And so after 7 days of her, after her leaving, I followed. I got on a plane. I got on Lot Airlines, sat in the most cramped seat between two older women. I'm about like Bob Shaw, man. Like very
yeah.
very old, right? And so I was sitting cramped, and then I got there, and that's how I ended up in Poland, in Warsaw. And from there, I applied to Vistula University. Um, Somehow made it. She made it to University of Warsaw. So I was able to finish my bachelor's degree. I kind of had to take an accelerated method because they gave me twice as many classes, so I could just graduate in the year. And so uh, that was kind of fun having to write a thesis for the first time. And then, of course, the year follows. She finishes her master's, and then I'm doing mine. And so after I had finished my master's that summer, we said, well, what jobs can I get? And so I applied in South Texas there at the university I was attending, and I was teaching undergraduate level courses, reading comprehension and technical writing. And so I did that for the semester, and we liked it, but we didn't love it, It wasn't really home. The culture was different, and we had been so used to Warsaw, to this culture, and so we went back, and to be honest, it's been great. I don't have any. look backs. I don't have any regrets on that. So that's how I ended up in Poland and staying in Poland.
Wow, man. I need to tell you, I've heard a lot of, crazy stories from my students, but this one was definitely one of the best ones.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah, yeah,
Especially
yeah.
being here. I remember getting off the flight and I was like super, very, very much jet lagged. And they're like, okay, cool, we're gonna drive you around. I was like, okay. And I was looking around. I was like, dude, like this is Warsaw. I was like, mind you, I've never been out of Texas. I've never gone to a major city, maybe once or twice, like Dallas or Houston. But I'm from a small town, so it was a very big shock to me that everyone's everywhere. You can see everyone. It was a totally new experience for me. Something that I liked very much, but it was a big shock, at least at first.
Yeah, nice.
It's been pretty
Um,
cool.
yeah, I'm just, processing because, I I just heard this story for the first time, so nice, nice, man. Um, so you are also a teacher. You teach and online.
Yes, I teach English more so as a study, not so much as a language. I do help some students with English grammar, with their speaking, pronunciation, but for the
Yeah.
most part, it's usually essay writing, comprehension, and literature. So within that area.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the question that you had proposed to me in the writing was, as a teacher, now a student, learning a language, how do I feel about my other students, whether, native speakers or people who want to improve pronunciation? How does that make me reflect, or how do I empathize? Well, frankly, I now have a totally different perspective on it is difficult,
Yeah.
it's extremely difficult, not so much in just writing, but in cultural understanding. I have a funny story about that, but we'll get to that soon enough. Of,
Yeah.
understanding what to say, when to say, the jargon in business and medical language and, basic, let's say, cultural language with different dialects. And so it made me very humble, to say the least, to really want to at least help my students improve not just language skills for learning English as a second language, but as for native speakers who are learning to improve upon the language they speak already. So it's been very, very eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this really helps a lot to see the learning process from like your students' perspective as well. Yeah.
It's definitely shifted my goal in teaching. Of course, in the United States, it's very different as, it's very much in test preparation, examinations at the end of the year. And so I really shifted to making my students take on a more sociable role, a community role, to not just develop skills to pass an exam, but to develop skills that are going to benefit them professionally and academically so that they can grow as a person and not just for an exam.
Yeah. 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 Um, so can you tell me more about Texas?
Yeah, of course. So, South Texas, from where I am from, is a bit of a melting pot between American and Mexican culture. People call it the Tejano culture, so Tejano, Tejano, and so Tejas, in Spanish, it's Tejas,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
well, Tejano, so and it's a very, very unique culture. There are cowboys, but they're not cowboys. They're called vaqueros. That's first and foremost. And so, growing up, my parents immigrated at a young age from Mexico, so they adopted the language. They went to high school here and they learned here, but they still had very traditional Mexican upbringing or standards. And so it was a very unique experience to one day, yeah, we'll do hamburgers. And the next day was, yeah, we'll do fajitas or, so carne asada. And I was like, okay, like, cool. That was normal for me.
Yeah.
Um, Most people, you know, they eat food with, knives or forks. Something that was normal for me was I would have a tortilla, tear it up into four. even sections and use that, to eat because that was how I grew up. And so it was definitely a very different culture compared to what, Poland is now, South Texas culture is very individualistic, everything you do is on you. So, if you dig a hole, you got to find a way out. It very much is, high in self-responsibility. So, if anything that I can truly say, that's great about it is one, the weather. It's always great, never too hot, 40 degrees Celsius, not too bad, right?
Yeah,
We could always like a good tan. Uh,
yeah,
another thing that I would say is very unique is the food, especially in South Texas. You'll find some of the best tacos you'll ever have just north of the border, but south of the border. So it's just a perfect little belt to find some of the best Mexican foods you'll have, from goat to cooked in its own blood to sopita with, I don't know, maybe zucchini. There's so many things that are truly just unique in that area. And I think for sure, if you want to, you can definitely go to Laredo, Texas, and that is a true just clash of cultures. You'll see people wearing cowboy hats and boots, jeans, with button-up shirts as a normal everyday wear. Going to church, they'll wear an even nicer set of boots and jeans that have been pressed.
yeah,
And so it's just a very, very different culture. In Poland, I understand, the whole cowboy, it's a, it's kind of laughed at. It's a done.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's a joke.
but
Yeah,
yeah, it is a joke exactly. And so here, at least in not here, but in Texas, yeah, that's the reality. People have guns. It's the whole cowboy kind of thing. Lifted trucks, vehicles that are too large for their own good. We're really, really just oversized for no reason, and it's part of the charm.
yeah. And
Um,
did you or someone from your family have or still have a gun?
yeah, of course. So my father, has many rifles, some
Yeah,
shotguns. And
yeah,
so, they're mainly hunting rifles, they're not any of the, tactical, automatic weapons. No, these are, 4 or 5 bullets in a rifle. And so we use them for hunting. Hunting is very popular, at least from where I'm from. White-tailed deer is a very popular animal to shoot for sport.
yeah.
Right now, some large ranch owners have special, let's say, licenses to have animals imported. So exotic animals such as zebra, some giraffe,
Okay.
some native antelope from Africa. So very, very unique area
Okay.
there, to say the least. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anyone, with a zebra in their house, but yeah, it's very, very unique, to say the least. So yeah, it's very much part of the culture.
Yeah, very interesting. So
But yeah,
it's
it's a
almost
very.
like Jurassic Park over there, man.
Oh, literally, yeah, it's like Jurassic Park, Chris Pratt, with his little gun, but um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very unique experience. I know many people, at least in Poland, hunting, fishing, they're sports, but they're not something you do normally, and so it's not very, popular in that sense, right? But in South Texas, yeah, like cleaning a deer, gutting it, butchering it yourself, like yeah, that's something I did growing up. Something that I very much didn't like because when during the season it's very cold, and so as you're
Oh,
gutting the animal, your hands get wet with with its blood, and it gets very cold and it's very, very annoying. It's frustrating. Your hands start to
yeah.
hurt, they cramp, and so yeah, it's a weird experience to say the least, for sure, but unique.
It definitely sounds weird, yeah.
Yeah, for most people
Yeah,
hearing this, from Europe or maybe even more, let's say, urbanized cities, locations, yeah, it is definitely weird.
yeah. So I've been interested, in politics, Donald Trump and the US for more than 10 years now, and a lot
Mhm.
of my students are also interested. So I wanted to ask you, about the way you feel the current political climate in the US and how it affects also Europe and EU in Poland.
So definitely when it comes to politics, it is very biased in the US when it comes to many news corporations. A big thing that I've now realized being outside of the US is how limited access people have to foreign news networks. So everything is kind of, regulated through The Guardian, New York Times, LA Times, and so we don't really get a larger picture other than a very narrowed perspective. And so coming out of that, you start to realize that, okay, like within history, the United States has had its role in time, and how it influences the rest of the world is never really shown to an average US citizen. You really have to go out of your way to see what the US plays in the global economy, in geopolitical, let's say, conflict or even resolutions. And that to me is, well, quite sad, really, because obviously it's very important to be aware of the issues or of the, let's say, well, relationships between the US and other countries. So uh, after I transitioned over, I began to realize just how radical US politics are. I'm not sure anyone in the Polish parliament right now is going to scream over someone else and call them stupid or call them names, It's not going to happen, um, to say the least. But to see the change, at least within the 3 years I've been in Poland, has been quite, uh, let's say, interesting. I do see how people are kind of transitioning with this Trump, let's say, Trump-like, persona. Everyone's starting to get louder. Everyone's starting to put on, more emphasis on things. They're trying to be as loud as possible. And so it's a very odd transition to see in, let's say, at least in Polish parliament or in Polish politics of how it's shifted. Now, to elaborate a little bit further on how I feel personally as a US citizen now in Europe compared to, being in the United States, I definitely feel after the previous, let's say, things that have occurred, the Zelensky conference, in which, they quite frankly were rude and, well, it was, well, embarrassing to see, political leaders speak and talk like this to another political leader. And so, from this perspective, at least from the, let's say, European or Polish perspective that I get to see, it's, well, this is just incredibly, just embarrassing on all fronts. And when I think of what do most people or what would most people think from a US perspective, they try to, try to hold this individual idea that, we should hold ourselves up and not help anyone. And so it's a very odd situation to look at from both sides. And so I do feel personally, like embarrassed as, anyone would if they're president or if they're vice president completely mocked or humiliated another delegate or representative from another country. And so it really is, well, a mess to say the least, So that's at least my perspective on this issue, or at least the most recent issue as of now with the Zelensky conference.
Yeah, you know, probably we know that politics, this is just a dirty game, and
Yeah,
what happened over there was just the newest evidence and example of how dirty it can get. I personally don't think that any American citizen is anyhow, responsible or has to do anything with what Donald Trump does or American politicians do in general. Because I think things are just much more complicated than that.
of course.
And and yeah, so also I wanted to say that we are recording this on the 3rd of April, 2025, which is the day after Donald Trump announced the so-called Liberation Day, which, as far as I understood, was about putting tariffs on most countries in the world.
You know,
And again today, I've seen a few pieces of news, and there is some kind of crazy climate. But yeah, I usually joke with my students that, if we still have electricity and internet, and then things are relatively calm, so there is, you know, nothing that serious happening. Um, so um, you probably know that Elon Musk decided to do more business with Texas.
mhm.
And what's your opinion on that?
I think when it comes to Elon Musk, it's a very unique situation. Long ago, um, Texas was proposed to have a particle collider, and that would have been a great scientific, let's say, hub for technology and innovation. Of course, we had NASA in Houston, or we do have a NASA in Houston, and so it's already great for aeronautic and space exploration. But to have a singular person, not so much a company or organization, it makes things a bit strange. So on one hand, it's fantastic to see that, there's going to be this large influx of technological, maybe business and economy. But on the other hand, it becomes apparent that it's just a single person. It's not an organization. It's not a group. It seems to be one person. And so many people, at least now, especially after Elon Musk is now, being very, let's say, controversial. I'm not too aware of what he's done, but I do know that, it is regrettable to say the least. And so obviously people do enjoy the economy that it brings, the financial support it brings, but people don't really want to be attached to the person behind it. I think the best example of that is now people are buying bumper stickers that say, I bought this before Elon went crazy. And it's like,
Yeah, I've seen this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
no, of course, I think it's the, at least Austin and Dallas, Texas are now are on the rise for AI, for data. And of course, because of Tesla, well, now, just overall technological, let's say, rise in power. So essentially, from some news outlets, and maybe I would say The Guardian, uh, have proposed it to be, a neo Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley of Texas. And so who knows, it might be really great, it might not, but as far as I can see, it's somewhat helping the economy as of now in the technologies.
Okay. Um, so let's talk about AI. And when it comes to learning languages,
Mhm.
do you use AI now when you learn Polish?
No, I don't actually. And I think it comes from maybe a stigma that, you learn a language from a person, not so much from maybe a machine or in, AI. And so while I do appreciate AI is very good with, translation for documents, for paperwork, I don't really see it telling me that, yes, Smalec is wonderful with, some gurki and vodka in the morning. It's like, no, like I don't think it's gonna tell me that. I don't think it's ever gonna tell me that Bimbur can be very, very good. You know, I also don't think it's gonna tell me that, uh, many other, let's say, colloquial things. It's not gonna tell me that I should stay quiet on the metro or when I'm taking a train somewhere. So there's small things that really add to the experience of being with the teacher, a physical person, than rather a machine. Pronunciation, different dialects, I mean, cultural things that I don't think I would ever know unless I had a physical person to be there to show me or tell me. So I definitely think there's benefits to it. Maybe document translation, But even then, you do need a certified translator for many documents. You need a seal, you need it to be apostilled. So I really don't see AI, overtaking the teacher's role when it comes to language acquisition.
Okay. Um, but do you use AI at your work,
I
in your
typically
job?
use AI for quick definitions. If a student asks me, what does viscous mean? I'm like, oh, I know it means thick. It's very thick, but okay, how else can I say it to them? So quick definitions. When it comes to finding maybe articles or let's say databases or journal publishers that can be useful for a student when they're writing an essay. Okay, well, I'll, generate the prompt, find me a find me a journal that is, let's say, peer-reviewed and within medical research. It'll spit out a few publishers. I can go through them, peer review them myself, and I'll use that to my best advantage for students. Now, I can't stop them from using AI on their own. So sometimes I'll get essays that are perfect grammatically, no issues whatsoever, until I read
Yeah,
it and then I realize, you've never said this word once in our meetings, so this is a bit strange. So
yeah, yeah.
overall, I do try to use it when I can for to benefit them, but I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I've had to overly use it or use it as a crutch for a last minute issue.
Okay. And how long have you been living in Poland now?
Now, after we just came from the United States, we've been here for 4 months now since January.
Okay, but in total?
In total, going towards almost 3.5 years. So
Okay,
I
so
would, yeah, so I would spend the academic semesters in Poland, and during the summer, I would go to the United States to visit, and I would come back, of course, for the semesters of schooling.
what would you say are the biggest differences between American and Polish people?
A very big difference that I've noticed is, let's say, not so much loudness, but overall openness to conversation. So if I go to Biedronka, I'm not going to talk to the cashier. I'm not going to say, "Oh, dzień dobry, jak tam?" There's none of that. It's not going to happen. They're
Mm,
scanning. They just want me to bag my things and go. In the United States, there's a very big culture for, let's say, not customer support, but customer appreciation. So as soon as you walk in, hi, welcome to the store. What are you looking for today? And that happens at almost every grocery store, any store really. There's a big customer service, let's say threshold. And so I would say that for sure is a big difference. Speaking to people randomly, again, back to openness. I'm not gonna talk to a stranger on the train about something that I see because that's strange. That is very weird. In the US, I might talk to someone randomly about something and we'll just have a conversation about it.
yeah,
When so that's a very big, shift. Everyone's very open in the US, and then of course here in Poland, everyone's very to themselves if they don't know each other. So
yeah,
to add on to that though, in the US, everyone is very quick to try and sugarcoat or be polite with many things, which is, okay, it's nice. But at the same time, if you want real feedback, it's not going to happen right then and there. They might tell you in private. They might tell you, they might message you, like 30 minutes later after seeing you to tell you. In Poland, people are very quick to be honest with me. There is no, lying to say the least or sugarcoating. It's a very honest culture, and I think that's something that I really appreciate, especially now just because a lot of friends and friendships that I have, are based on that just honesty, and I really do appreciate it. So yeah, I would say that's one of the biggest culture differences is just people and openness and being reserved.
Okay. And do you have any American friends in Poland?
I don't have any American friends in Poland. I do have a few classmates from the university I attended, still in Poland. I do message them when I can. Of course, they have their own lives, so we message when we can.
Yeah,
So one of my closer friends, Artur, he'll send me memes, pictures from Poland, that I get. We'll talk to
yeah,
each other. We might call, he might ask me, what am I doing? You got a minute to talk? And so we'll just talk, just about anything. And so that's usually how I've managed to, still have friends, of course. So, yeah.
yeah. So let's imagine the following scenario. In the future, let's say next year, you already have an American friend and they know you've been learning Polish for some time and they just come to you and ask you, okay, man, I'm really jealous. I want to speak Polish like you do. How should I start?
How to start. I would definitely recommend to start is finding something you want to say, having it translated, you can use a translator or some other phrase, and practicing it. Things that you want to say, practice them and say them. Sure, it may not be the most practical phrase ever, I don't think anyone's probably going to say, oh, I need to cook pasta. If you love saying that, translate it and practice it, you know? I think for sure finding words that you enjoy to say and practicing them is the best way to start. And then from there, try to find music that you like, that you can listen to and appreciate, maybe not for the lyrics, but, for the sounds, just so you can listen to the different things that are being said. So I definitely recommend practicing phrases that you want to say first to really, let's say, branch into the language.
Yeah, mm, very good. Um, so you mentioned that you've been watching Ranczo,
Hmm.
right? Tell me a little bit about Ranczo and why do you watch it? Why do you like it?
I really like Ranczo because it shows a lot about the Polish culture of what it was, 10 years ago. And mind you, it's changed dramatically in the past 10, 20 years. And in Rancho, you really get to see a older mentality, post-Soviet mentality of where democracy had just occurred. And within the first few seasons of Rancho, we see these construction workers, they're just taking their sweet time, they don't care. They're gonna get paid anyways. And one of their friends had gone to the US for work, and when he came back, he wants to do everything immediately. He wants to get it done. The faster he gets it done, the faster he gets paid. And so you can see where there is a shift in, maybe a mentality of what people may want within the culture. And for me, at least, it genuinely shows a simpler idea of what it meant to be, successful in a country. And not only that, but it really shows me a big, let's say, shift of what was viewed as very cool or very popular. So, for example, in Rancho, Lucy and Kuse, they both speak English, and everyone is, super amazed that they speak English. It was this very grand thing, and that, she's from America. Ooh, she's so, uptight maybe, and, she's not. And so you get to see just how the culture has shifted dramatically from this worldview. And so as the seasons continue, you get to see how it gradually improves and gets better in the city, in the town that they're in. And you see a sense of, a modernity kick in of where people are now understanding of, a larger global view. And it really is just a unique perspective that you get to see shift throughout the seasons. I think it really does show the testament of culture for Poland, of, of that it is very traditional, and how it still manages to find its way, to slowly maybe shift or evolve over time while still maintaining all of its traditional aspects. And I think that to me was probably the most engrossing part of it all is that they all still had these cultural values. Sure, they were getting a new bus system, they were opening new shops in the stores, there were people from other places coming in, and it still remained true to its core of what it was trying to be. So that's something I really liked.
Yeah, so I had a few technical issues and we had to record this part again. So here we are. You see, I have shorter hair now, which is obviously
Yes, I
something.
have shaved as well during our break and changed clothing. So, yes.
Yeah, so here we are again a few days later. It's the 8th of April 2025. And yeah, so we'll start this part with the question, do you feel like learning Polish is essential to fully experience life in Poland?
I would definitely say yes. And while you can get a great experience in Poland of learning the culture, to truly be integrated into it, knowing it does definitely help. Due to knowing the language, you're able to understand the context of history of the culture much better. For example, as I had previously mentioned to you, I'm trying to read Jade, and in the English language, we don't have a word for a, let's say, a ghost that had killed themselves is now stuck on Earth. You know, there's no term for this. It's just a ghost who happens to be stuck on Earth because he killed himself. There's no real term for that. So, learning upior was a, let's say a contextual necessity to understand why this occurs, why this is being written. And I think this also goes further into, let's say, conversation. Obviously, there are, different slang terms, different derivatives, diminutives that I didn't even know existed. Um, so I definitely personally believe that, yes, in order to truly appreciate the Polish culture and Poland itself as a country, one does need to learn the language.
Yeah. My next question is, how do people react when you try to speak Polish in Poland?
Definitely a few przepraszam, nie rozumiem, jeszcze raz, I'll get a couple of those. And so I'll really try to try again when it comes to speaking, trying to really enunciate every letter that I can to ensure that I am saying them correctly. There have been times where I will speak, and of course, I don't understand the grammatical rules, so I will make mistakes. But even they understand at some point is bag, and that's it, especially a Biedronka or Lidl, it's like, yeah, torba, torba, dobra, spoko. So, that's it. And so I would definitely say that it's been a learning experience in having to, speak like a child to grown adults and have them think what is wrong with you. But other than that, it's been quite good to say the least, in that when I do speak, for the most part, simple instructions, simple sentences, people are able to understand. However, anything beyond, jem śniadanie or, something simple, it gets a bit more difficult. But for the most part, it's been okay.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you, do you still feel like a Texan living in Poland, or is there any change in the way you see yourself now?
I would definitely say I see a difference in myself and what I am. Growing up in South Texas, of course, the whole cowboy masculine, this idea is very prominent, but in Poland, that doesn't exist. It's a joke, Kultura is a cowboy, it's gone, cowboy is it's dead, There's no people, there's no shootings, there's no nothing, and so these things are, they're funny to most people in this culture, and so I've definitely seen, a change in my style. primarily, my actions, my thoughts, as given that it's a, let's say, a more modern culture in Poland. You don't need to, let's say, be as, shoot first, ask questions later. So definitely there is a big difference in my whole demeanor, especially now as, I've completely transitioned to Poland. I would say, there are instances where I would be upset. I would have gotten, maybe let's say a bit frustrated, say, for example, in traffic at some point. But here, understandably, everyone is driving and they're very careful with their vehicles. This is primarily just a Polish, culture in which, you buy something, you ensure that you take care of it. While in the US, it's a very different culture. It's a throwaway culture, different economy entirely. So there's a lot more care between, let's say, things in Poland. So it's definitely changed the way I view things, my perspective at least, especially from that transition of, caring for things more so instead of just throwing them away. It's now transitioned me to really shift not just that, but also my work practices as well.
Okay. And another question about AI. Um, and do you think AI will help people like you to learn Polish, or like just in general, do you think AI will increase language learning?
I definitely agree that AI can be beneficial for language learning, but for example, a few years ago, I tried to use ChatGPT to find out more about Poland, find out more about the culture, the history, and it was quite limited. In Helm, where my wife is from, there is the legend of a white bear that saves a troop of Polish soldiers, and as a result, I wanted to find out more about it. So search the internet, everything's in Polish. Okay, great. So I tried to use ChatGPT or any other real, let's say, AI at the time, mind you, in 2023. So it was still kind of new. And there was no information on it. It was not updated. Of course, now I feel that if I were to find it, yes, I would get some insight, but it wouldn't be enough to understand the context or the significance of this bear. Um, so I definitely agree that yes, it's great if you want to practice, if you would like to, learn a bit more, or let's say see what you can do, what questions it can ask you to help you with your, let's say, understanding. But again, when it comes to, for example, our conversations and culture of Poland and the culture of the people here, there's really no substitute for that. Unfortunately, AI does not have the, let's say, interpersonal, cross-communicational, let's say, answers that I would have wanted.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so you had a job interview recently. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, of course. So this job interview was to be a English teacher at a military university in Warsaw, and it went quite well. We enjoyed speaking to one another. Of course, my wife was there as well, of course, to get me into the base because yeah, at this time, in their words, the security's words, is that um, I am a foreign, let's say, national citizen, with a, let's say, less than favorable, let's say, friendship now to the country. So within the span of 5 days, it is April 8th. I, as a U.S. citizen, was not, let's say, easily allowed to venture really to go anywhere. So, granted, there are formalities of security. However, even given a one-time pass, that was revoked because of the current situation with the United States and Europe. So, that was one thing. But of course, the interview itself was quite well. We described the, let's say, the topics that the institution had wanted as a standard for English, the types of courses that are offered from A1 beginner introductory to English acquisition, and then of course to C2 plus or even Stanag English for NATO English for Polish military troops. And it went very well. And not only that, but I was able to understand and learn that yes, in this profession of teaching in Poland is much different than that in the United States. Working hours completely different. I understand that teachers work 25 to 30 hours a week in Poland, and well, 20 to 30, depending on where you're at. And in the United States, it's a full 40-hour work week. And so it's a very, very different mode of, let's say, education. Uh, Aside from that, when it came to the university itself, it was very nice. Of course, a military university, so there are troops, there are, barracks for the students, both civilian and military. And so it was just a very nice experience to not only see the campus, but to be given the opportunity to at least have an interview. Hoping it goes well. But of course, I was just very happy to have had the privilege to visit and speak in this for the job opportunity.
Nice, nice, man. Um, so before we wrap up, can you just tell me what are your current goals with Polish and how are you going to achieve these goals?
My current goal now is, of course, to have a general conversation with my wife. Sure, I can pick up on some context of conversations when we have our family or our friends over, and I can understand, but I can't add to the conversation. And of course, I would love to add to the conversation. And so what I'd like to do now is just to be able to express what I'm feeling, what is happening, or of course what I'm doing. And so the mode or the way I hope to reach that goal is, of course, through practice of conversation, not just with yourself, but with my colleagues from university, my previous classmates that I still keep in touch with, my girlfriend's family, or my family, of course, now, and of course, practicing as much as I can with the book, trying to, let's say, really get a grasp of the pronunciation. I do have a lisp, so should kind of sound the same to most people. That's a comment I've gotten uh, pretty frequently. So things like this, I really do hope will help improve my, let's say, understanding of the English language and my Polish speaking skills.
Okay, yeah. So as I said the last time when it wasn't, recorded, I think you're very well motivated and just keep learning, keep practicing every day, and you'll definitely achieve your goals. And yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. It was very interesting talking to you twice. And yeah, and see you in the next one.
No, I really appreciate it. Janusz, bardzo dziękuję. Dobra, so trzymajcie.
Małgorzka mówią mi,